Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to Facebook Live. It is May the 5th. It's considered Cinco de Mayo, so happy Cinco de Mayo to all those that are celebrating Cinco de Mayo. And welcome. It also is May the 5th, before the Sunday for Mother's Day. And our incredible Eileen had this beautiful idea, creative idea that we should focus today on the topic of motherhood, relationship with our mothers, and how to heal our relationship with our mothers so that we actually have what Eckhart calls peace that passes all understanding. This coming Mother's Day, whenever we are interacting with our mothers or thinking, if I know some of us, our mothers have passed away, so if you're thinking of our mothers, even in that thought, we have that peace that passes all understanding and unconditional love and gratitude for the mother that gave us birth. So here we go. We are joined by our normal panel, which is Travis, who is our musician on the panel and a spiritual teacher. Good evening, Travis. Then we are joined by Kelly, who is a Qigong teacher and a spiritual teacher. Good evening, Kelly. We have April, who is a psychic and a spiritual teacher and a little bit tired. Good evening, April. And then we're joined by Louise, who's an author of a wonderful book, Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. Is that the title of the book, Louise?
Grandparents Returning to Parenthood.
Grandparents Returning to Parenthood, about grandparents raising their children, right? Thank you. Thank you for that correction. And a spiritual teacher, and of course, our incredible Eileen. So Eileen, how did you want to get started on this topic? And was there a question?
Sorry, I'm still tagging people in the group. I actually had a couple of things that I posted in the group, just in case nobody had sent anything. I didn't have anybody send anything about mothers or motherhood. And so hopefully people will contribute to the conversation. But I do have just noted down some topics that have come up around mothers and motherhood previously. So I am okay either way.
We can start with the first topic that you have. I do have a question from Sandhya, but
sorry, child just walked in for the 10th time in the last 10 minutes.
It's a beautiful thing, right? Our greatest spiritual teacher is...
Yes, absolutely. This one has not been my teacher for quite some time now, but is today. So thank you. I have written down one thing for myself that came up the other day when I was having this idea was that I personally have gone through a healing process around trauma after abandonment. My healing just happened in the last year. Hasn't even been a year. It was like fall. Thanks to those people here and a few others. And so I guess for me, I have a bit of curiosity because this will be my first Mother's Day after that process, where I now am grateful for the mother who abandoned me. I'm grateful to be a mother, which I had never had been before. Um, and so I have a bit of curiosity of how, not that I should care so much, but how this Mother's Day would be different, but trying not to um, bring expectations in, because that's another source of suffering for me every year around holidays. And so I am a bit curious about that.
So you want to ask the panel, how do they feel this year about Mother's Day?
Sure,
Thank you so much, Eileen.
no problem.
And let me know when you're ready to speak about your healing, since you're tagging people, and then we can have you speak.
Absolutely. I'm just kind of multitasking right now between
Sure. Just
being
raise your hand and
being
let
a
me know.
mother
Okay, cool.
and
Understandable. Understandable. Thank you. So Luis, did you want to get started on this? How is Mother's Day going to be different if you've had the growth this past year?
Well, it's always seems to be changing, and I think it has a lot to do with, how I'm evolving as I grow in my spiritual path. And so, there was a time where, when drugs entered our lives, where I just, would cry. Like, I walked down the stairs, it would be Mother's Day, and my son would be there with flowers or something, and I'd just see him and I'd start crying. And he'd go, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I just feel so sad that, this is happening. And I don't even feel like I'm, I feel like a failure to my daughter." And, I had all these just horrible feelings around Mother's Day. And it's changed every year since then. And I just, attribute it to the more presence that I brought into my life. And I know I've said this before, that there hasn't been a lot of doing, like it's more about being. And I feel like that's, like these shifts have taken place that I really didn't do anything. They just kind of happened. Like I just woke up one morning and I was like, okay with everything. Like, but then along the line, there's, as you grow, other things come up, and there's like layers that you're unpeeling as you grow. And now, I feel good. I feel at peace. I feel happy. I, sometimes wonder how my daughter must feel because I know that there's that strong bond that's unspoken between a mother and a child. And, I wonder how she must feel, or, when she sees little kids that are like the same age as hers, like if that bothers her or whatever. But I do really, believe that this is her path right now. And, whatever happens, but I'm okay with everything right at this time now.
So this
And
Mother's
I
Day,
do know too, the kids' point of view is like, like Olivia and Jack don't really like remember her, but Dylan has those same feelings that, like, Eileen has shared about feeling abandoned and feeling like, he'll often say, "Why do people say that they love you and then they just leave?" Or he's got this like aggression, that we're working through, but I know that it's something deep inside of him that will take some time.
and just like it was for Eileen, that is his soul contract with his mother,
All right.
right?
And I think that's probably why I'm okay too with my daughter, because I feel it's our soul contract. We agreed upon this. And so I'm okay with that. Just like I am with my mother, you know, like her and I've always had a super close relationship, and now it's changed because of Alzheimer's. But I'm okay with that because, again, I feel like we've agreed upon this. And I'm just here to support that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Louise. Beautiful.
Thank you.
It probably will be his journey to, and it's amazing that he actually has a grandmother who is already awakened that can walk him through that journey, right? And I'll bring up Sandhya's question as well. So that is his condition. The condition pattern for him and for Eileen would be the abandonment, right? So humans constantly get up and leave, like partners may leave their partners, fathers may leave their children, mothers may leave, but that's the spiritual lesson that is presented for that soul at that moment. And I'm sure April and Kelly will have something to say about it. The whole reason, there's another very synchronistic reason why I'm bringing this topic up. And I was so happy that Eileen brought it up. You know, we're the people that are in the 2021 course. This month is the module 2, which is working on our relationships, right? And what Eckhart says is, Ramana Maharshi said that, how do you know your progress on your spiritual path? And Ramana Maharshi says, the amount of non-thinking or thoughtless awareness that you can be shows that you're progressing on your spiritual path. And in that module, the way Eckhart starts module 2 is, according to him, he says, it's the module is called The Importance of Your Relationships. He says, your relationships and how healthy are your relationships shows your progress on your spiritual path. So do you think this Mother's Day you're going to be joyful and no crying, and it's going to be much more different and has been different over the past 2 or 3 years, right?
Yes. Each year, you know, like I said, like things have unraveled and there's been growth, and I feel like that was such a different person back then. When I think about it, like I was so like fragile and broken and emotional. Like I literally cried like every day for about a year, like maybe even more than once a day. I was just totally flatline, and every year it's just gotten better and better and better. And you know, one thing that both my husband and I agreed upon, like when we first got married, is like we wouldn't like give into, like we don't give each other gifts for Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or Father. We just like said, you know, they're like Hallmark type holidays, and we, you know, we just like will honor each other on our birthdays and at Christmas, but we don't do like, you know, big huge thing. So I had already, you know, had that agreement with him, so I was already kind of used to not making a big deal about these times. But Mother's Day became a big deal when all this started happening with my daughter, because it's, you know, shed light on a lot of problems that needed to be resolved. And a lot of it was resolved within myself. And so, yes, I'm at peace and I'm happy and I have no expectations. It's like any other day really for me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Louise.
Mhm.
Eileen, are you ready to speak to your healing?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Patience and grace. So I said that I was thinking that I was having like thoughts of curiosity, like how will this be different? Like this has got to be different. But without expectation. So it's not like I'm expecting anything from it. I'm expecting nothing really. Like, and so it's just been so hurtful and so full of suffering for like as long as I can remember, as a daughter and then as a mother myself. And so I guess I have this like feeling of peace already, um, that everything is exactly how it should be. Um, but it's just, I guess there's a little bit of excitement because it's almost like that it's possible to not suffer through a Mother's Day. Like it's possible to just be. And so I am, excited that I've, healed how I have. And so for people who haven't been following our lives, I was abandoned at about 4 or 5 years old. And over the last few months, I've, learned that that's something to actually be grateful for because she was incapable of being my mother. Absolutely incapable of it. And I think I always knew that, but never really thought about it as something to be grateful for, that she gave me a gift, because I was raised by my father. And that's a wonderful gift, absolutely wonderful gift to be raised by him. He's amazing. Had she not, the suffering would have continued. It would have been different. It would have been suffering through being with her. And so I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful that she gave us up, my brother and I. I'm grateful that she gave us up. I'm grateful that my father raised us. And it's helped not just myself heal, but it's helped my kids also. It was like an overnight change in the dynamics of our relationship and our household, all in like just in a few moments time, being able to realize how grateful I was for her. The whole thing just shifted. And so I'm definitely a believer of being able to heal not just my own suffering, my own like personal healing, but like that generational trauma, because it's changed my relationships, it's changed my children, it's changed their future, it's changed my future. And something that was new that came up for me just through this process over the last week was that I've also struggled with the concept of mother and motherhood because I was put into the mother role as a toddler because I was the one who mothered my brother. So even though I was only 3, 4, 5 years old until we were given up, that was me as a toddler, raising someone who was, just a year younger than I. And so there's all kinds of stuff that's gone on, but I'm seriously grateful for all of it, every bit of it. That's all. I don't want to keep going. I mean, I have more, but I don't want to we'll let other people talk.
I'm trying to receive it all. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Arlene. So it wasn't easy. Like when you say, so one thing I want the viewers to understand is when you say, I am grateful, the quality of that gratitude is very different. It actually is, like we've talked during Facebook Live, some people say, I'm grateful, or some people say, I forgive. Oh, it's okay, I forgive, but they really, really don't mean forgiveness, or they don't mean gratitude. Here, it really, really means that you're grateful.
Yeah, I truly was given the gift of my life as it has been by her. Absolutely.
So that's one thing, like, but that's because of the amount of presence that has increased within you over the Facebook Lives, over your meditation practice, over all the sessions with Ryan. Ryan has been doing a lot of presence practice sessions as well, right? So the healing that came. So there's an understanding of that soul contract that she was meant to abandon. It could be April, whenever it's your turn, you can speak to it. It could be that at some time in the past, we would have abandoned somebody. So this soul that is the mother, who could have been our daughter or who could have been our son in another lifetime, has chosen to present us, be our spiritual teacher, present us with this lesson. The same thing with your daughter and Dylan, that he still remembers the abandonment, right? That the lesson is now I'm going to abandon you, but can you see the ultimate sacrifice that I made? Can you see how transcendent that one moment was, where a mother gave up the child for the safety of the child? The mother understood in that moment, in that single moment, she had so much awareness that she knew how dysfunctional she was, right? That she couldn't take care of these two kids. And that was the ultimate, because April and Louise can speak to it. As a mother, I don't think I can just take my child and give it away, right? So the fact that they were able to do this, any mother that gave up their child, and we labeled it, one of the things that Eckhart says, right, we label a situation. So you change that narrative. The narrative before would have been, my mother abandoned me, but now that you saw the sacrifice, there's that real gratitude. The quality of gratitude is from presence. You can be grateful for her action, right? That she gave up her children.
Absolutely. And I feel like now, whereas before I would have like pushed the whole idea of her away, like, because there's been times in my life that she's kind of been around somewhere where I am. And I would have like kind of wanted nothing to even do with her or see her or whatever. But now I don't live anywhere near her now, but I feel like I 100% accept her as she is, because she's still 40 some odd years later unconscious. And so I just fully accept her as she is. She doesn't know what she's doing still.
Beautiful. So having compassionate surrender for their unconsciousness as well. Thank you. Beautiful. Hopefully, like people that are watching, somebody can take this example and follow that path, right? That it requires maybe contact you and find out how much presence practice you've been involved with that took you to this. Some of it has been the conversations that April, Kelly, we had with the Facebook Live Q&As as well, right? So thank you. Thank you for that, Eileen.
No, thank you. And I have April to thank for a lot of it. So grateful for her too.
She brought it up a few months back, right?
Yeah.
And then the second narrative that you could have applied is, and you freed yourself from that, is the victim story of, oh, even at the age of 3 and 4, I was left to mother another child. Instead of saying that here, it gave me a chance to bond with my sister or brother, whoever the sibling was, right? Instead of saying, look how much quality time I was able to spend with them and bond with them, right? There was a special connection with that sibling, that sibling required at the level of your soul needed to serve that soul, whoever was your brother, right? And that's what the only thing was that at the level of soul, you needed to serve that brother, and it happened, and that's it. But the narrative could be the victim story, and like spiraling into the victim story and saying, oh, look at me at age 2 or 3, I'm left to take care of my brother, how unconscious, how horrible are my parents, I had such a horrible childhood, whatever the story is that the thinking mind makes, right? So beautiful, 2 good examples that we can learn from. Travis, did you want to say something about how this Mother's Day is going to be different for you? I know last week you spoke about even watching some TV show that helped you build like a totally different relationship with your sister. I think your sister's passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it? So your mother's soul and your sister's soul, you have a total different relationship. So I want to hear how you feel in the past year or 2 through a spiritual practice, the presence practice that Eckhart talks about. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying I recommended that show, Seatbelt Psychic, to my brother, and he Wikipedia'd the guy, and as best I can tell, it might be all acted and not authentic, that show. So just so that's out there. But nevertheless, it did kind of stir some things up for me that I found very useful. So it served its purpose for me, and I'm very grateful for that. And while it felt like a bit of an opening of sorts and a kind of powerful message and communication from loved ones past, for me, there was kind of an opening there and a gift there in these last couple of weeks for me. It didn't really feel like anything new per se. It just felt like a new expression of something that I've already been in the midst of and aware of for quite some time now. When my mother was alive, I always had a really great relationship with her, as far as our soul contract, or the way our souls connect, and whatever kind of bond and agreements are there. It's one of the smoothest, coolest, least tumultuous relationships I've ever known. And that's a tremendous blessing to have that relationship with my mother. She's just been the greatest consistent and constant support in my life, in her life, and in her death. And so there are ways that she's been able to be there for me and to leave me my space to be when she was alive, that worked so well for both of us. And now with her past, it seems as though there are new and different ways that she can support me. Some beyond this does surpass my understanding, and that's fine by me, because I don't claim to understand what it's like on the other side or whatever, but I feel her love, and I feel her support, and I feel her guidance, and to me it doesn't feel like a loss. It just feels like a change, and I like it. I mean, when my mother passed, I remember getting the news and driving over there, and I was happy. You know, I was maybe happy might not be the best choice of words, but I mean, I was laughing, and I was in a deep space of, I knew that this was the time, this was right. She was in a lot of suffering, so I was also relieved for the end of that suffering that she was in this incarnation. Uh, but to me, my mother, you know, it's the relationship, if you want to call it a relationship, is great, and has been great. So for me, that's never been a problem, that relationship for me. I've had other more tumultuous relationships in my life, but that one never really has been very much. And even though she had her challenges and shortcomings, I not consciously anyway, do I remember ever feeling very much a victim of her behavior or shortcomings, or and so I know for me, the last couple of days, I almost feel like Mother's Day came a little early for me, or began a little early, having a Mother's Day week for myself in a way, just because I've been admiring some of the women that I know that I'm close to who are mothers, and it's such a beautiful and sacred blessing of a role to play, at least from it. It appears that way to me from where I stand, um, to be able to be a mother, um, and and actually, you know, give in that way, and have life come into this world through us in that way, to me seems so special. And so I've already begun reflecting on some of the different, you know, really special mothers that I know in my world, and in a way too, I feel like I have many mothers, more than just my you know, my birth mom. I have other older women in my life that fulfill that role in some way or other, you know. And so I'm grateful for that. Um, there's nothing like a mother's love. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Travis. That's beautiful. That you see the grace in all the women that were able to, even though your mother has passed away, there are other women that have provided you with that motherly love, right? To see the
Takes
grace in that
takes
is
a
beautiful.
village, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think we all have it. We may not know it, but we do.
To honor them. Beautiful. Honor that and hold it with such sacredness, the way which you speak of them. So thank you. Thank you for that. It's exemplary. Kelly, did you want to say something about healing towards your mother, or how is Mother's Day different for you?
Sure. Well, Mother's Day isn't really different. I come from a family full of strong women, and I've been very, you know, honestly, very grateful. I realized early on in my life, going to school, how different my family was. Both my parents worked. My mom and dad, bless them, really supported me and were really there for me as a kid. Really supported me exploring, you know, the arts, philosophy, you know, religion. They talked to me, and they, you know, especially when I was a kid, my big thing was, you know, the question why, for, you know, hours on end, kind of thing, you know. And it really hit home when I started going to school in the city, because I grew up out in the country, went to school in the country in a French Catholic school, and I wasn't French and I wasn't Catholic, and that was an interesting learning experience in life. But my mom and dad were really great, and supported me in a lot of ways. And, you know, they're also very independent people themselves, and tended to leave me to my own devices. So I got to understand how to be alone with myself at a very young age, and, you know, could immerse myself in my art and reading and the research and stuff like that. The growing pains with my parents have happened much later in life, as I, you know, struck out on my own and moved out and stuff like that. You know, my mom had a car accident when I was 17, 18, and I spent quite a number of years helping her recover. And when I moved out, she was really upset because she wasn't going to have that support around anymore. But I ended up working with her, so I was still around. It was just I wasn't at home all the time anymore with her. So there's shift in growing pains when that happened. Mother's Day, we sort of like do the call, I'll talk to my mom. Father's Day, same thing. I phone people and talk to them and stuff like that. And my mom loves to talk about politics and things like that because that's her whole side of the family and all the work that she does. And she knows that she can basically tell me anything. So if she goes too long without seeing me, she gets a little cantankerous, you could say. And we've grown a lot over the years, being in my 40s now, and having done a lot of things that my mom and dad never done, all my martial arts training competitions and stuff like that, because I was it took a little while for my mom to sort of wrap her head around how capable I was, because I'd grown up a sickly child, and she still sort of had that projection, that limited belief of who I was. And finally, about 6 years ago, she came to a competition and watched me fight, and just I just shattered her whole like fear concept that she was holding on to. And watching, like, she never come to any competition before. She never seen me do my thing. And she, I blew her mind because she'd actually never let herself experience that. And afterwards, there was this huge shift in growth in, the mutual respect, because she finally had an idea, right? She didn't really know what I did. And then she actually saw what I did. And then it was just like, oh, wow, blah, blah, blah. And then we had some great conversations. And a lot of mutual respect grew out of that, and grew out of those conversations, because there's a deepening of understanding, and we allowed ourselves to communicate. And I also, having worked with my mom for almost 30 years, I know that's a completely unique situation as well. And I'm very grateful for having both parents that I have. And I having grown up remembering a lot of my past lives, I remember my mom and dad from a few of them. So I find the juxtaposition being the son or this adult in this adult relationship that's growing up between myself and my parents, to be in a cosmic sense very ironic, and makes a lot of sense, remembering some of the things that we didn't communicate about in past embodiments, and really feeling like for me, it's always like when I'm feeling a lot of resistance about a certain topic, looking into that feeling with my mom, because she's very very strong-willed, and her world is like how the world is kind of thing. And having to learn how to navigate and communicate with her about certain things that are beyond her understanding has taught me a lot about myself. And really, my mom and dad have been amazing spiritual teachers themselves, because of all of the communication barriers that I have had to work through with them, and in the process learn about myself and my own things that I've held on to, ego resistance and fears about communicating in the past. So the blessing of having parents, whether or not they're and now sort of ending up as a step parent, I guess, and having kids to sort of, I don't know, I really don't know what the word is. I mean, it's chaperone, or I'm their valet, and like body, I don't know. It's like one of those things where there's multiple roles going on, and I find myself sort of becoming friends, and not the biggest thing that I remember reading about, here's one of the some of the books that were on the shelf were, about parenting at home, right? And it was one of the things that really struck me when I was a teenager reading about, it wasn't What to Expect When You're Expecting. It was, there's a second book or a sequel to that book. And, this is how sort of like unique my upbringing was. Like my mom and dad would put books in front of me. It's like, you need to read these. It's like, because this is how adulting works. I'm going, that's the kind of relationship I've had with my mom. And it was about being a step parent. There was a paragraph about how, when an adult finds themselves in a relationship or taking on the role of supporting another parent with children, or being in a relationship with someone, that whole family unit dynamic. And, I'm background in psychology too, and came across this years later. The main thing was to not try and replace the other parent, not try and become the other parent or the parent that is no longer there. In my case, like being the dad, right? And the main thing, from all my work, is realizing how important it was for me to have friends, or just people I could just talk to or feel safe with. And that is one of the things that I've been very grateful to have been able to share with my mom, is being able to talk about pretty much everything, with a reason, but pretty much everything. So having that kind of space of communication really helped me understand how to sort of step into this role of being, a supporting role model for these young people that I find in my life, and how that sort of like snowballed into being able to have like really amazing conversations with all of them. And, sort of go, oh, this isn't, again, I feel really, really lucky and blessed. I know it's not always as easy, or, and I know my path, my journey with being a role model is very different and very unique. And I've been blessed to have parents who are really, really good, really amazingly supportive when I was younger, so that I have that as a point of reference. And that's sort of where I share even my own perspective on teaching from, is the love and support that my dad and my mom gave me when I was a kid.
Thank you, Kelly. So when you said at 17, so I was put in that situation where around that same age, 16, 17, I almost did everything for my mother, like all the errands, supporting her, right? So when I came to the US when I was 21 or so, she felt like I abandoned, like the same kind of feeling that I abandoned her, right? So I kind of feel this is a great example of where a parent, I don't exactly remember the words that Eckhart uses in chapter 2 of A New Earth. He says identification is Edom and Fakr, like making something the same as myself, right? So humans have this past condition pattern of making everything, like if I believe in wearing blue shirts, I want everybody to wear blue shirts. If I believe that you see so many people who are vegan, then they want everybody to be vegan. There's so many people that if they're doing paleo diet, they want everybody to do the paleo diet. And they're like, really, really, that all that is trying to make the other, we have to look at the ego. And this is the beauty I love and I adore and admire Eckhart for, that he knows that this is what the thinking mind does, that the mother is trying to make us, whether it was in Kelly's case or in my case, the mother is trying to make the child into an image of what she wants the child to be. And here we are resisting it, right? By leaving, which I moved thousands of miles away, nowhere near her. You at least moved just out and in and out and in, right?
I
So,
moved out. I moved out of the house, but I ended up, I was working for her with her anyhow,
yeah,
and so that was, I guess in some respects an easier transition, but
exactly.
still, shocking
As,
to, yeah, that control, that identification where the parent goes, oh well, the life should be this way, and you're my child, so you should be this way. And I'm like,
so as mothers, we have to remember that we are trying to, if we ever get into my child should be this way, then here is the child showing I'm not going to be that way. I'm not going to be, look at your ego, mother, right? So thank you. Thank you for that example, Kelly. Reminded of my own experience. April, how has Mother's Day changed this year for you? And has there been growth the past few years?
Yeah, so when Eileen brought this topic up, my intellectual mind says, I need to study this topic. I need to figure out what I'm going to say, right? Because I like to be prepared and I like to be, intellectual, and I like to know what I'm going to say. But then I decided that I wasn't going to do that. I was just going to let source talk through me. So I didn't prepare. And I think one of the things that has changed over the last few years is I have less and less expectations. Not that I really ever had expectations, because my kids ask me what I want for Mother's Day or what I want for my birthday or what I want for Christmas. And my answer is for you to be happy, for you to not have depression, for you to pay your bills on time, for you to pay your rent. Side note, so you don't move in with me with your 10 kids, but just kidding. But sometimes that's a real thing. But that really is my truest wish, is that you will be happy and successful in your own right. That is what I want ultimately, for you to go to school, for you to get up in the morning for school, for you to, do these things. So, but I, even as I get older, I find that my girls are getting older and they have their own families as well. I have my two youngest here, but so I find that I'm having even less expectations of, I remember the first year one of my daughters brought up the fact that they were a mom too. And it kind of really stung me for a moment. Like, hey, what do you mean? Like, and now I'm like, you know what? They are moms too, and they're busy and they work and they have to get up and do kids and school and dinner and homework and baths. And maybe we don't want to do anything for Mother's Day. Maybe you just call me and say, hey, I love you. So I think losing the expectations, but coming with that, it comes from a source of knowing that I don't need things. And so I'm more okay with me. I'm more okay in my own presence. I'm more okay with the fact that I already know that I'm loved and I'm part of source. So I'm not sure if that makes sense to everybody, but I'm more okay with me as it is. I don't need a flower. It's not that a flower isn't nice, but I don't need it to validate, right, my momness. Because I'm probably if there's a scale, I'm too much of a mom. Eileen's story and mine is so unbelievably similar. It really is. So as she was talking, I just found it amazing how similar it is. And I myself was thrown into the mom role very young. So one aspect of that came up when Eileen was talking was that being raised by my father, who was a very strong ex-Marine military man, that dominant male energy, being put into that mom role so young, it kind of created that balance I needed with that male and feminine energy, right? Because my dad's male energy was so strong. But because I was thrown into that role so young, I always had this mom female energy that was really strong. It's a very nurturing energy, the mom energy is. And my mother wasn't nurturing. She wasn't raised in that environment. again, my favorite quote upon all quotes is, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And when Eckhart explained that, and he explained the pain body, that was really a huge shift in me. When I realized that it was my pain body that was wanting all this validation, was wanting that perfect mom to be in my life. Why weren't you there? Why this, why that? And when I realized that's all she had to give me. She didn't have any more to give me. I can expect more all day, but she literally can't give me more. And then when it comes to my children, I think that's one of the bigger roles as a mom, with me having so many children and then taking on my niece, is the more that you can, I want to say adapt, but it's not adapt. It's not the right word. The more that you can embrace this idea that that's all somebody has, that's what I have done as a mom with each one of my kids. Each one of my kids is so different. It's phenomenal. They come from the same parents because they're so crazily different. My oldest daughter is very black and white, very, this happened. My second daughter is off in fairyland. We asked her to write her wedding vows, and you guys, it's on a piece of paper, and it says, on this day, we get together with the lovely bunch of coconuts, la, la, la. That's what it literally says, okay? So we were like, so when I mean fairyland, I go from one daughter who's very black, white, to this. So I think that not just just from being a mom and having all these children, that's taught me even more on my journey to accept people where they are. I also think that having to be this mom and being in this nurturing role, that feeds right into my counseling job, feeds right into that. It all lines up perfectly when you look at it. And the fact that I was going to have so many children and be a single mom for so many years, that all lines right up where I needed to start being a mom really early, right? So when you do like Eileen has done, when you pull out the blessings, when you pull out the gratitude, the thankfulness, that's when the pain stops. That's when the healing starts, and that's when the pain stops. When you can stop asking, why me? Why did I not have a great relationship with my mom? Why did my mom not love me? Why did she not want me? And legitly, my mom has basically said in not so many words that she did not like me and she liked my brother more. When you can stop asking that and get your love from the infinite source that you are, which is God, you don't need that approval. You don't need that. It's okay that it didn't happen. You can understand. You can pull the gifts out of it, and then you can move forward. And that's basically what I did. Was I replaced that missing mom love with God's love, with the infinite love of all that I am. And I replaced my lack of worth with the worth that I know I am because I'm a child of God. And that's what also helped with all the healing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, April. And how much ever her surface, and this is something that Marla actually brought up during group meditation. She was telling another group meditator about this. So how much ever the mother says, I don't love you, like the surface or the identified unconscious human being is saying, I don't love you, or I love your brother more than I love you, her inner being is still loving, right? That's one thing that I've understood from actually listening to Abraham Hicks. Our inner being is constantly, how much ever our surface reality may say, or the little I may say, I don't love you, or I hate you, or I don't like you, the inner being of this person, the mother, is saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you unconditionally, April. I love you unconditionally, April, because that's what source is, right? Is source is loving unconditionally.
I'm glad that, so it's kind of the same space that Eileen's went into, or I think all of us have went into, is that the more that she said that, or that she did that throughout all the years before she passed, that pushed me to source. It pushed me there because I needed that healing. And that's where you get the ultimate healing. There's no higher healing than presence. There's no higher healing than source. So thank you for not liking me. Thank you very much.
Because if she would have loved you, then you would have thought that your love comes from her. You wouldn't have known
Right.
that the love is within, which is what both of you have, all of you have figured out, right? That the love is actually in that stillness. The love is when we are completely aligned with our inner beingness, then love just flows and it doesn't require an external person. Even if that external person is a mother or father, we don't need their love. We don't need to seek their approval, right? So let's go to the question. There is a question from my daughter has, Gina says, my daughter has excluded me from family events for 9 months. Now she wants to squeeze me in on Saturday for lunch. She's having a huge party Friday night with family and hasn't invited me. She blames me for all her problems. My heart hurts. Okay. April, did you want to get started on this one? I think you'll be able to.
Yeah, the first thing was the very fact that she is squeezing you in on Saturday means there's a door open. There's still a door open. There's still some sort of communication. So that in itself is a good sign. If she just totally, because I work with people, and if they just totally will not communicate whatsoever, then it's a little bit bigger of an issue. But the fact that she is willing to open that door means that you do have a chance to repair the relationship. And again, this person, this daughter, is in the same phases that we were in at one point, where instead of looking within, instead of healing, instead of understanding the bigger lessons, instead of understanding, like with my mom, one of the things that I was supposed to learn was forgiveness from her. That was one of my soul plan lessons, was forgiveness and unconditional love for the fact that she couldn't be a mom. So in this daughter is still projecting all of those hurts onto this mom. But this daughter, because she hasn't went through the healing phase yet, where we stop projecting, we stop doing the victim mentality and blaming others. So what I would say is I would take the lunch on Saturday, and I would try to be open. I always advise to do much more observing, listening than talking. Try to just do much more observing and listening, just being present, being there. If perhaps, we've done things like I've talked about with my daughters, especially my first 3, I was young. I didn't do everything perfectly. And there's been a few times where I have said to them, I just want to let you know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't do it right. I thought I was doing it right. And one of my daughters even made a statement once, well, this is what my mom would have done. And I looked right at her and said, just because your parents did it that way doesn't mean it's the right way. And I was talking about myself. You can just say you're sorry. But instead of your heart hurting, I would just try to take the opportunity you have, and I would try to go in with a lot of presence, a lot of presence and a lot of understanding, and see how where that gets you. And then she can write us in the group how it goes and we can respond.
Awesome. Thank you, April. I love that recommendation that offer your daughter the spaciousness of presence and just listen, don't say a word, and don't have any expectations. What I was talking about with Kelly, like as a mother, don't say my daughter should be so and so, right? Because she's not meeting your expectation that my daughter should invite me to this family event, or my daughter should have a relationship where no, your daughter wants to have you on Saturday. That is what is surrender, right? Acceptance of compassionate surrender, as Eckhart says in his module. So thank you, April. I think I see Louise back. Louise, did you want to say something about Gina's question that's posted on, that Eileen has posted?
I was basically going to say exactly what you said. Because that was the first thing that came to me, was not to worry about other events or her relationships with other people, but to just stay in the moment with what is, and just enjoy that. There's no, I think that's where we get carried off, when we start thinking like, oh, I wasn't invited to this, or you start allowing yourself to be offended by things or hurt by things. But it's just, I find that the best thing to do is to just accept what is and enjoy that now moment.
The other, like the pointer came to me as you were speaking, Louise, is, and this is the question that Sandhya had asked. We do it after everyone speaks to Gina's question. So where did the daughter learn this conditioned pattern of cutting you off from her? My question would be, did she not learn from you? Have you, Gina, not cut her off when she was little, right? Did you cut her off from relationships, like maybe relationship with an aunt or a relationship with your own mother, right? The condition pattern has been picked up somehow. This daughter has learned somehow to say, no, I'm okay with cutting myself off from my mother. Where did she learn it? Right? So
That's a good
it is a conditioned pattern that they have picked up from the environment, whether it is the school, whether it is the culture, whether it's a generational, what Eileen was saying about a generational, look into your family history, where your family, go look into your uncles and aunts and your whole family tree and see how each person has cut themselves off. Like did a brother stop speaking to a sister? A mother stop speaking, or father stop speaking to their son or daughter? Did that happen in your family history? So all the daughter is doing is showing a conditioned pattern, generational pattern in your family, right? So have compassion for that unconsciousness that she has picked up. And we'll talk about it a lot more. That's going to be my next question, because Sandhya had asked that question. So thank you. Thank you, Louise, for that. Eileen, does something else come up for you?
Some of the stuff that April mentioned came up for me, but also just, I mean, we talk about being in that present moment. And so like accepting the invitation for lunch and, bringing presents. But I feel like we have to be accepting of all of that. Being accepting of not being invited to something else, or being accepting of being blamed for problems, even if you don't, think that they are your fault or whatever, but just being accepting of the whole entire situation. And I talked about this in something else I was at recently, even being grateful for it, because it's not so much that you have to like whatever it is. I think there's a common misconception with gratitude. Like, you don't necessarily have to like something, but you can still be grateful for it. You can still be grateful for, the lesson that comes out of it, the healing that can happen. And I like how you brought up, those generational patterns, because it's often the case. And then again, it's not so much something that's in their control. The daughter's not necessarily targeting her or attacking her because of something she's done to her daughter on purpose. She's not a bad person. No one is.
Beautiful. Thank you, Eileen. Like, have compassion for her conditioned pattern, that she's repeating an unconscious pattern that is in humanity, and just have compassion and gratitude that hopefully she learned through her suffering. Because whenever we act out of unconsciousness, we've been doing the what's it called, dealing with unconsciousness, and the Eckhart, in that talk, dealing with unconsciousness, talks about karmic luck is compensatory, right? And we have a video as well on our YouTube channel. So she is suffering. She's not realizing, she's even unconscious that she's suffering her suffering, right? But once we act out an unconscious pattern, there's karmic law that they're suffering. It's already inbuilt in there. So I think Florence Scovel Shinn actually called karmic law as the law of forgiveness, because tied in with that is that we need to learn the lesson of forgiveness, just like April was saying. So thank you. What did you think about April's pointer, that the fact that she got a chance to take care of her little brother when she was little, she was given the nurturing. I love that pointer as well. I forgot to tell you, April, when I was speaking to you, that you get the nurturing quality already inbuilt, where you would have had like a male yang energy. Instead of that little mothering gave you a yin energy, which you were able to bring to your mothering your children, right? You may not have known how to take care of children if that yin energy was not given to
Yeah,
you.
I had goosebumps when she was saying it, because I'm the oldest of 8 kids.
Oh, wow.
And knew as a high school student that I would be a teacher. And so, I mean, I've mothered hundreds of kids at this point. So
Beautiful.
grateful for it.
So you're living out the spiritual lesson. Even if you cast a judgment on your mother, that my mother abandoned me, you were given the opportunity to mother other children. So you kind of, what do they call it? Compensated for it. Kind of like paid your debt to that judgment. So beautiful. Thank you. Kelly, did you want to speak to Gina's question? Thank you.
So I really appreciate everything that's already been said on this topic. I agree with everything that's been said. There's lots of wisdom to be taken. I completely agree with what you said, Poonam, that one of the things that's happening here is that the daughter is repeating a learned behavior. I've witnessed this kind of action, behavior, there's the word, behavior in my own family. And it's, control is control. It doesn't matter how you slice it. Or whether or not you put peanut butter or jam on it, it's still control. The reality is that when, sometimes as we've talked about and it's been mentioned, you know, we've grown up and we disagree with how we were parented. We disagree with how, you know, we experienced our parents, and we do not want to parent like that. So, you know, sometimes what happens is that people, when they become parents, they distance themselves from their own parents because they believe in something different. And unfortunately, oftentimes that is expressed in overt hostility, anger, blame, and shame, and other sort of fear-based actions that are there to cover up the fact that the level of communication to be open and honest is not there. It's wonderful to hear that there is, even though the family thing is happening on the Friday night, that the daughter wants to have lunch. Because as April said, that's a door. The door is open. Even though you're not being invited and you're being excluded, your daughter is still indicating that the door is open. She wants to see you. She obviously wants to talk, and she obviously wants to build a space where there can be trustful, honest communication, and that's a gift. I mean, I've been through periods where I will be very honest with people, and then they'll sort of like shut me out and not want to talk to me for weeks on end because they can't take my honesty. And you know, that's happened to me my entire life. And I've learned to, you know, respect it. Sometimes it's hard because there's a lot that's left unsaid, and there's a lot, you know, I'm a communicator. I love being able to actually have a communication and share and collaborate in building a mutually supportive environment of sharing both sides of the coin, and having that loving kindness being like the foundation of communication with someone else. So it's really hard when I can tell that someone else wants that, and there's no open door, and you know, and there's a lot of control thrown in my direction. So going back to the control issue of the pattern, the learned pattern, and you know, this is one of the things about being present with self, being mindful of one's own actions, feelings, thought patterns, thought constructs, is understanding the origins of the why we do things. And this is why being present with self is so incredibly important, because it gives you a toolbox for being able to go inside and look at why a certain hurt or a certain pain is there. You know, Gina, if you're listening and you're hearing this, the fact that your heart hurts is a really good indication that you love your daughter to bits, you love your family to pieces, and you want to understand how to grow beyond where you're at right now with your daughter. So that is wonderful that your heart hurts. Instead of it being about pain, understanding that the pain is there to remind you how much you love your family. You know, maybe flip that on its ear a little bit. I've had to do that. That's why I'm saying that. The You know, the pain of being aware of being excluded, wanting to be there, wanting to share with family, is, you know, I grew up where we had family dinners every Sunday without fail. It was either one side of the family or the other for literally, you know, a quarter of my life. And you know, as people got older and grew up, and then we moved out of province, and you know, people went to school and you know, had their own families, there became less time, and the family dinners basically stopped. It was hard because, you know, I miss my family. I love my family. I'm very blessed to have, you know, wonderfully intelligent and generally funny people to hang out with when I'm around my family. But looking into the mechanics of why we feel what we feel, being able to go inside and look at why my heart hurts and have that conversation. Like sometimes, you know, the best conversation you can have is literally with yourself. And I will like talk out loud in the kitchen, you know, in the car or whatever, to literally process it out loud. Because honestly, sometimes hearing it is the best thing, because then it's like, oh wow, it's like, oh, that sounds, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then you say something else like, no, that's no, that's just that, no, that makes no sense whatsoever. So, maybe have a conversation with yourself, talk about why the hurt is there, what it feels like, where you feel it started. Going back to the start of the beginning is really, really important in these kinds of situations, because it will often illuminate that one moment, that spark of the issue or the lack of communication, and where the pain started. And when you go to have lunch, keep an open mind, keep an open heart, discipline yourself, tell yourself you are not going to judge anything that comes out of your daughter's mouth. Because the most important thing, and this is having become a step parent, it's really evident how how I learned to do that with my parents has come in really, really handy with the kids, and just letting them express themselves, no matter, even if they're like absolutely enraged at me or I triggered them and they're just like, going gonzo and they just need to like vent and be angry at me. Doing that with them has been a huge threshold where, holding my heart, still being present with myself and not judging anything that comes out of the mouth, no matter how angry or how vile even it might be, has completely changed everything. Not reacting, not responding to anger or fear or judgment is really, really important. Because when you do that for someone else, you're also doing that for yourself. And when you are gifting someone else with that experience, of that loving kindness, support of non-judgment, you're also allowing yourself to feel that same space at the same time. So all the best with the lunch on Saturday, and I wish you all the best in terms of growing beyond the space that you and your daughter are currently in.
Thank you, Kelly. So another condition pattern that you brought up was blame, that your daughter Tina, your daughter may be blaming you. And I would use the tool that April gave you, is all you need to do on Saturday when you show up for lunch is say, daughter, please forgive me. I know I was not a good mother to you. Please forgive me. And say it with presence. Do your meditation or get into stillness so that it comes from presence. And you just say, I just love you. I love you unconditionally. Please forgive me. And look how much that will change, because you take away the blame. She can no longer, if she's able to hear the forgiveness that she needs to forgive you, then you take away that's another conditioned pattern that exists in humanity, where we are constantly looking for blame. Oh, the problem is not with me. I'm not an unconscious person, but it is with my mother who I need to blame, right? My mother did not raise me correctly. She didn't give me good things. The narrative starts, right? The victim story. Oh, she didn't do this, she didn't do that. Kind of like the mother and father are the easiest to blame, because they are the original two people that we entrust our life to, right? So thank you, Kelly. Thank you for that pointer. Travis, did you want to speak something to Gina's? Thank you.
Sure. I'm just going to read the question here again. Well, it's interesting that she's excluded you for 9 months. I feel curious about that. I feel like this. I wonder why that time frame. I could imagine that could be really hard. That she's having a huge party Friday night with family, and that you're not invited to go. As human beings, it's it's so in our genetic code to want to, and our sense of safety, to want to belong and be a part of and feel connected. And so I can imagine that that would just be a tremendous challenge. And so I commend you for attempting to meet this challenge gracefully at all. It really does seem as though life has put something, you know, a real test before you. So if you can find the space within yourself to consider it an honor, it would probably, you know, serve you and everybody else. I also want to kind of interrupt myself and just say that this speaks to me very much. It speaks to something I feel like I'm dealing with in some of my relationships, and so I'm grateful also for the question, because it's a real source of reflection for myself. I can see how this situation, as in my own personal situation, it would be really easy. It's just loaded with opportunity to blame and expect something else of the person, and want for it to be different than the way that it is, and not want to just accept it the way that it is. So I can really understand how it's triggering a lot of pain in you. And so I really empathize with you, and so I know for myself what I intend to do in my similar situation, and so I guess what I would recommend as a possible option for you to entertain is to try to find that space where you can see that this person isn't the cause of your hurt. This person isn't the cause of your pain. It reminds me of, I know Eckhart Tolle references, I think it's from A Course in Miracles. He almost, you know, offers it as like a mantra, this statement, I'm never upset for the reason I think I am. And I know for myself, I always feel good when I'm actually able to kind of re-empower myself and remember that this person, they haven't created the pain in me. That's my own doing. It's all within my own space to find the healing that I need. I don't need, just as you don't need for your daughter, I don't need for whoever in my life to act any differently, do anything any differently than the way they are, for me to find my peace, for you to find your peace. And there's a lot of relief and freedom in discovering, rediscovering or realizing that for ourselves. So, and so I would say, you know, I agree, and also I very much agree with everything that's been said here on this, and I think it's wonderful that there is an open window for you, an open door for you. I say, you know, it's clear how much this relationship matters to you, and to do your best to make your pain your own, deal with it yourself in your own space, in your own time, and do the best that you can to, when there with your daughter, just try to keep things easy and light, and offer her the grace that you would like to receive, and focus on what you can give to the situation rather than what you would like out of it, what you might get out of it, what you would expect out of it. But come back to, you know, you might be surprised at what you have inside of yourself to give, and it might serve as a source of discovery of the deep resources that you have within yourself you might not even know are there, and that you can be, you know, in charge of your own satisfaction and your own peace, and not need for her to do anything differently than she already is for you to find that. And but again, I know my personal situation is very challenging, it's so easy to paint myself into a victim and go, this person isn't behaving in a way that I think is appropriate, and put myself in that seat of moral superiority. And I go, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want that for me. For me alone is reason enough, let alone for them. That's not what I want to give to the person I care about. And I'm sure that's not what you want to give to your daughter. So good luck. And I hope everything goes well on Saturday. And it might be wise to take some time to maybe sit or meditate or walk outside or do whatever. It gives you some ease and peace just to be able to meet that situation as gracefully as you can, because the better you're able to meet it, the more likely that it'll turn into more of what you want. So, and just, you know, just by going there and giving your best and letting go of expectations and outcome, however challenging that may be. So.
Thank you so much, Travis.
Mhm.
And I would go back to when you started to focus on how her heart hurts. I would go back to what I told April, like every human that's saying, I'm going to, like maybe you're saying that she's cutting me off by not having a relationship for 9 months, but her inner being is still, so your inner being and the other person, Travis, are still unconditionally loving. You already, even on your deep eye, you understand your deep eye, so you're unconditionally loving the other person, but even the other person, their inner being is loving you. Yeah, on the surface, their unconscious patterns are coming through, right? So coming back to Sandhya's question, so we were watching this during group meditation, we do 20 minutes of video. I would welcome like the whole group to come join us. We enjoy it immensely, and we actually talk about the video. The cool part about it is each group member talks about their personal experience related to that 20-minute section. And sometimes they talk about whatever they're experiencing in the moment. So as part of the video, Eckhart says the parents pass on a conditioned pattern down to their children, right? We repeat the conditioned patterns. Like, you know, you almost kind of know, and partners know it very easily. They push the button, right? If I say this and I push the button, then this person is going to get livid. If I say this, then this person is just going to storm out of this room. And we already know some of the patterns that our partners will exhibit, right? But it is a conditioned pattern that was handed down from our parents. So Sandhya's question was this: after she heard Eckhart say that during the video, she said, okay, so what is the conditioned patterns that we potentially have? So I want the panel members and group members that are online, type away, what do you think? And knowing Eckhart's first 5 chapters, he's actually pointing the first 5 chapters of A New Earth. He gives pointers to what is the conditioned pattern in humanity, which is also, if we observe from presence, this is a generational pattern in our family, right? It could be a generational pattern. And then what Sandhya was saying is, we karmically, genetically, we may, some patterns, genetically, we may pass on the foods that we like, right? Genetically can be passed on, right? Some patterns are from being in the family. So the parents, mother and father can give you that pattern. So what is the conditioned pattern of your family? Have you all looked into the conditioned pattern in your family? And generationally, do you know what is the condition? Have you all healed from that pattern? So that becomes the karma, right? That becomes our karma, is to unlearn that pattern. That's what Eckhart is saying, is unlearn the pattern, so that the dealing with unconsciousness is about unlearning the pattern and being non-reactive to all these conditioned patterns, right? That may have. in the past we were reactive to it. Now because enough presence power is in there, we've healed the pattern. So now we are non-reactive. And so we don't participate in the karmic law, because karmic law is compensatory, is the whole, I gave like, within 3 or 4 sentences, I gave like a 2-hour talk of his, right, that we've been watching. So I'll give you a couple of examples of mine. Like anger, I know my great grandmother had horrible anger. My mother, maternal side, my mom had it. So I had it. And there was a potential that, so learning how to be non-reactive to anger. The second thing generationally that I know, because I am born into a Hindu Brahmin family, in India, I'm sure everybody knows we have the separation of, the lower caste, you kind of separate. So I actually was the child that resisted, showed the resistance pattern to my grandmother. I would sit with I would go to my servant quarters and eat with them out of their plates, which is a no-no, right? Even as a child, as a 7-8-year-old child, I would go do that. So that was an unlearning for me, right? To be okay with humanity already as a little child. So I want you all to think of your generational patterns that have become the karmic patterns of your family and speak to it. And if I think of another one, I'll speak to it. I gave you all a couple of examples, right? So, Louise, you want to get started? Generational pattern. Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing that came to mind is alcoholism, because my dad's dad was an alcoholic through his whole life. Like he was in the service for part of his life, but then once he was out of the service, he never worked or anything, and he was and then all of my dad's siblings are all alcoholics, and then a lot of the kids. So that's something that, like, I don't know why, but just since a young child, I always said I'll never drink. I'll never want to treat my kids this way. And so I've never really, I will drink occasionally, but a lot of times people will ask me, are you an alcoholic? Because I always don't, because I don't drink. So they think I'm an alcoholic, but it's really that I don't, just have chosen not to, because I've seen how it's hurt through the generations and just how difficult it is for everyone involved. So that's one thing that came to mind, but I can't really think of another one offhand, but that's just one that I've seen where it's just gone from one person to the next. And it was something that, since a child, I just always just saw alcohol as like poison almost. Like I just never really have been attracted to it, wanted it. And even when I've had it, I've just always like, why do people like this? I just never. So, but I knew from a long time ago that I didn't want to continue that pattern in my life.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of healing that pattern for your grandchildren too, because you're doing all the juicing and the heavy metal detox smoothies and everything. So they're learning a healthy way they're being raised.
Yeah, and even like my adults, right. And even my adult son too is that way. I guess he picked that up from me. Like when my daughter-in-law met him, she said, that's so strange. I've never known like a 22-year-old that doesn't like heavily drink and party. And he likes water. And she was just like amazed because he was so different, like he doesn't play video game. But so he kind of picked that up for me, and he's that way too, like does the juicing and the whole bit. And so these kids now are doing that. You know, they're very aware of what to drink and what to eat and what's good and that type of thing.
Awesome. Beautiful example. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So you're the generation that is healing that pattern in your family, and karmically you're healing it for all the future, as Eileen was saying, for all the future generations as well. So thank
Yes.
you. Hi, Jack. Hello, Jack. So cute. You're adorable, Jack. Happy belated birthday, Jack. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You must
Even though
watch
it's
it.
not even my birthday.
Well, it's belated. That means after.
Eileen, did you want to speak to this generational, what we may have picked up from our parents or generational pattern?
Yeah, I have some of that.
Thank you.
So I talked already today about abandonment, and as I've been sitting here like listening to everybody share, a couple of more layers of that kind of came up into my mind. So one thing that came up was that, so I've healed from that abandonment, but then part of that, I guess as a result of that, was like a judgment of myself of not being good enough. And then that like desire to do the same thing. So like to just leave the situation. So I have 2 kids, but until just the last 2 years, I totally could see myself doing the same thing, like just walking away. I'm not, good enough for this, which I know now is not true. But so like that's something that I'd have to look more into it to see, what kind of happened prior to my mother. But that's something that's obviously kind of has, come up, and I've, broken that, of course. And then I've talked before about how suicide runs in my family, and 3 generations, and have completely removed that from the table. And so that's just extremely healing for me to know that not only have I, healed that for myself, but that that's not something that's going to follow my children. So there are 2 that jump out right away.
So one of the things that Eckhart says is with abandonment, the reaction, so this is for Sandhya's edification, the karmic pattern would be, if he didn't have enough presence power, the condition pattern would be, even if somebody was 5 minutes late and you were saying something about a student being late and you were getting, or you being late and you would get irritated about it, you were late to a meeting. So that's related to that abandonment. The reactionary pattern of somebody being late and our thinking mind creating this irritation or annoyance, the emotional field of annoyance is actually related to the original abandonment. The first wound is the abandonment, and that created the reactionary pattern. So now, once we observe the reactionary pattern when we are late or another person is late, that this is associated with my abandonment, then we forgive ourselves and we forgive the other. It is what it, that's why Eckhart says, it is what it is. If I'm stuck in traffic and I'm 5 or 10 minutes late, then that is what is.
Mm-hmm.
That is the
Actually,
outcome.
just talking to Ryan about this last week, I think. We were talking about the little irritations that we still, have. And one of the things that I mentioned was, someone else being like late to an established meeting that we've all agreed to. This is the time, this is the day, um, and then the wait, like having to wait. And Ryan, he's accepting of everything. He's, amazing, but he's always like, nobody's ever late. Like, it is what it is. It's what it's meant to be. It's what it's supposed to be. Which I work really hard at, like, understanding that and accepting that. And I said, I'm not reactive anymore. Like, I don't react when it happens, but I'll just have this teeny little bit of irritation that's like, seriously? We agreed to this. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was already sitting here thinking about some other things, big things that have happened in my life that are not necessarily related to um, my mother or my parents, just different relationships through, the decades, um, that now I see were those lessons that were coming back around to be like, okay, now we're going to present you with this. Are you going to abandon him? Are you going to abandon her? Are you going to abandon them? And each time I, didn't necessarily accept, but didn't run. Like, I haven't, but was, suffering and having, resistance that now looking back, it's like, if I had just accepted it with unconditional love the first 25 times, then
The 26th time wouldn't have happened. And the other part to it is the person that came in late for the established meeting is your spiritual teacher. The soul contract that they have with you is to show you your irritation. And they'll go away. The day that you can bring an uncompromising yes to anybody being late, then all these lessons will go away. Nobody will be late. Everybody will be on time, because you don't need the lesson anymore. That's how it works, right? Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that example. Travis, did you want to speak to condition patterns that you may have from Eckhart's first 6 chapters? He goes through all of them, like what are our condition patterns in humanity itself. So about your family. Go ahead. Thank you.
Sure. I think I understand the question enough to answer. Well, I mean, it's funny because when I look at the things that I see in my family, I can't help but to notice the universality of it. Because I mean, what I see is there are feelings there that it seems like they might be too painful or difficult to face or feel. And so what I notice is my family has, a small menu of avoidance tactics that might be different from another family's. So I could list off my family's menu of the top 5 avoidance tactics, which I feel like in my family has been more around substance use and stuff like that. It's just kind of normalized and pretty unchecked, and just accepted, I think, in ways a little bit beyond what might be, I would say, probably in the majority of families out there, would be my guess. And so, but the thing is, and this is one thing I've noticed in my own life, is I could say, oh, okay, well, I've when in my youth, I've done all sorts of drugs and stuff like that. And it's not that I don't ever do anything like that anymore, but the relationship has changed tremendously over the years. But what I've noticed is say I was smoking cigarettes, well, I would remove that. And then I would almost immediately find something else. You know, maybe then I'm smoking pot or something. Well, then I remove that. Okay, well, maybe now I'm trying to date and find romance all the time, and I'm avoiding facing some pain inside. I remove that. Now I find myself shopping. Now I remove that. Now I'm using television, you know. So, but so it doesn't. It's not the thing. It's not it's not the thing that you use to avoid facing or feeling so much, because I think we're all intelligent enough that we could find a new thing just like that. In my family, it's been more things like that. I think for a lot of us, there are a lot of things that we can do too, and it's good to be aware of, that are very socially acceptable and socially rewarded. These things can also be ways to avoid feeling things inside of ourselves, but they're not going to have negative social backlash, where you might be, for example, somebody might be very ambitious and want to achieve a lot and succeed a lot. And that's how they feel more complete. And that's how they feel more whole. And that's, or attempt to anyway. And cover up the questioning, the question as to whether or not they're, what their worth that's in question, who they are that's in question. And so, and I feel like there's kind of, I mean, there's really one thing that we're avoiding facing, but I feel like it kind of goes in two directions, because oftentimes there's pain from our past. And it's hard to get down to the essence of who we are when there's these things we don't want to look at, these areas of pain that we're carrying around, that we're trying desperately to find ways to avoid having to look at and deal with and feel. So that's our past. But then there's also, I think it is and can be really challenging to just to let go of our ideas of life, our ideas of the world, of God, of who we are, of everything, and let all that go. Can really make us, you know, can feel scary. We don't know who we are. We don't know, it feels like dying, because we're losing everything that we've known and that's so familiar to us. And so it doesn't even necessarily have to be a lot of pain that we're holding on to. Sometimes we can do these things just to avoid moving forward, just to avoid growing and, you know, blossoming into our fullest potential. So I think it's important, you know. So in a word, with my family, it's been more stuff around substances. We don't hide behind our accomplishments. We don't have a lot of you know, high achievements in the family or anything like that. We're just pretty simple people that just kind of are content with existing, and there are some good things to that too. But I think that yeah, I mean, I know I'm trying to face those things and see, you know, am I caught in patterns and cycles of avoidance strategies and I mean, I feel like if I probably am. If I wasn't, I might be what we call a fully realized being, because what else could I be avoiding than that? So so I don't know. That's probably kind of the best I feel like I have to offer right now on this.
Beautiful. Thank you. Even I, just like Louise was saying, right, Travis, I had a family friend of my dad. He was alcoholic and he was a really good person. But once alcohol took over, he did all kinds of unconscious things. And I decided, like as a child, that I wouldn't, and my mom had a tobacco. So this seems to be a conditioned pattern in humanity, addiction to some substance, whether it's tobacco, cigarettes, or and we kind of think that tobacco is very benign, but it still is an addiction, right? Just because
Tobacco is one of the most severely addictive things. I know people who have been addicted to heroin who said that quitting smoking cigarettes was more difficult. That nicotine is a very powerful physical addiction
right.
for some people, not for all people. But yeah.
Yep. And she had the chewing tobacco, not the cigarette, but she would chew. In India, we have like betel leaf, and we chew it, but they put tobacco in the betel leaf. So she had a chewing tobacco issue, but my grandmother had it too. So addiction seems to be pretty common between all of us. That's a generational pattern that we could have picked up, but we decided we were the generation that decided that we would break apart from it. April, thank you so much, Travis, for that. Beautiful.
Hi. So I've been listening to everybody. Yeah, in my family, as I was listening to everybody, I think we got them all. I think my family has them all. I think we have all the conditioned patterns. I think everything is a conditioned pattern. From our school system, our work, our genetics, our thinking, our behaviors, I think it's all a conditioned pattern. And my family certainly has all of them. We have depression that runs in my family. There's anxiety, there's substance abuse. There's an interesting pattern on I guess it's on both sides, where I have family members who we tend to own our own businesses. My aunt owns her own business. My uncle did. I do, on top of my job. And then there's a really interesting pattern that starting with my mother, my aunt, my cousin, all 5 of my children, one of my granddaughters, every one of us ends up with a cut on our eyebrow. Every single one of us.
Wow.
It's not all of even my granddaughter has it. 2 of my granddaughters have it. We end up with this cut on somewhere on our eyebrows. Still don't know the meaning of that one. So from what I've learned is that these generational patterns are ancestral as well. Some say they can go back, like genetically, back 7 generations. Ancestral, I think they go back way more than that. They keep repeating. There is genetic patterns also of like not just the addictions and all of that, but in my mom's side of the family, of bad relationships, getting in very bad relationships, non-supportive relationships, just all kinds of patterns. So you and when one of you, I think it was you, Poonam, that was speaking, I kind of had this like drop-in kind of session where it's not really to toot my own horn, but I am really the black sheep. I really am. Like, yeah, I'm so different, where I really wanted to stop all these patterns. I really wanted to stop all these conditions. And it's not like I hadn't used substances in my life, but I don't use substances. I quit a 35 year cigarette smoking addiction, and it is way more addictive than heroin because the half-life of nicotine is so short. That's why it's worse than heroin. Quit that. And, so I really, until you want to be the generational breaker, the ancestral lineage breaker, until you want to heal from the suffering, and until you awaken, these conditioned patterns will continue. That's the key. Is for some reason I dropped down in here and was like, I'm going to break all these patterns. most of them anyways, haven't accomplished that goal yet. And that's really the key is learning to break these conditioned patterns, whether they're biological, mental, emotional, ancestral, is learning to break those. And you do that through awakening. You do that through presence, through growing, through learning. And I was given the gift of having that desire starting at a young age. And I'm hoping that some of my children will continue that pattern. Maybe my grandchildren will break that. That's my hope.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, April. Yeah, it seems like if we are on this spiritual path, and I think the spiritual family, our spiritual family is that way, that all of us are the generation that is kind of breaking the generational patterns, right? Or else we are at least investigating, right? We are knocking on the door and investigating what is this pattern. So the example that Gina gave of her daughter cutting her off, one of the patterns that my maternal grandmother and mother had was removing us from relationships with other people. Like she would say, don't talk to her own sister, right? Like this cutting off the relationship with blood relatives. That's a conditioned pattern. Just like Gina is talking about, there's so many on, like Nancy used to say, right? Her sister, she stopped talking to her sister. She stopped talking to her mother. So it seems like another generational pattern, what Eckhart calls making another into an enemy. The ego loves to make another an enemy, and the enemy could be your own sister. The enemy could be your own mother, and you've stopped talking to your mother. Since we are talking about Mother's Day, this is the perfect opportunity to heal that relationship and not make your mother into an enemy, right? Forgive her for whatever, whoever she is and however she is, because she gave you birth. So that was one pattern that I wanted to also talk about, that creating enemies is, the ego loves to create its enemies, and could be our own family that we create into an enemy. So I'm very, very careful, like even if, like Byron Katie says, right, like even if somebody is walking away, like you suddenly lose a relationship, right? But how do you internally feel about that relationship? Like, let's say somebody that we were talking about in, like had been attending the group meditation and suddenly they leave. I still hold that connection with them. Like I send them love, occasionally think about them. They may not be showing up anymore, right, to group meditation. So that cutting the pattern, I'm making my, the memory pattern in my own spirit, unlearn that pattern of that I don't cut, the relationship is not cut off from my side. Yes, that person may no longer show up for group meditation, or a friend may no longer contact me, but from my side, the cut is not from my side. I still have that unconditional love for that human being. That's what I wanted to explain to everyone, because you can tell every human being to start loving you, right? People are going to do what they're going to do. That's their level of consciousness. You can't ask the whole world to start loving you. But from your side, are you unconditionally loving another person is what matters. So thank you. Kelly, you want to wrap it up? I know it's getting late and Eileen is about to like fall asleep.
I will do my best to keep this short. I really like everything that's been said here. I really like, yeah, April, yeah, Black Sheep here. Travis, I really appreciated what you said about being physically present, but emotionally not present. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not gonna do what you said justice. The reality is that ancestral patterns, family patterns, they are passed down. In Qigong, we call this original Qi, where we have both our original Qi from our previous embodiments, plus the energy that we were born into, the patterns that we're born into. And at a soul level, my understanding is that we choose our parents because they provide with us, for us, and with us, a space of the greatest potential for becoming aware through experiencing limitation and having limitation reflected at us. Being the black sheep of the family, one side of my family is Mennonite. The Mennonite tradition is both Anabaptist and pacifist. Anabaptist means that you do not get baptized until you are of age and choose to take the word of whatever church into your heart and become, a follower of Jesus as king, et cetera, et cetera. Never done that. Not going to do that. And the pacifist thing, well, I've spent 35 years studying violence and how to, train in the martial arts and various arts and how to, deal with violence and understand violence to a very precise degree. It's something that's been profoundly humbling and has made me a much more aware and mindful human being, and a much more loving human being, when you understand how easy it is to hurt someone physically, let alone emotionally and mentally. The reality of, the other side of my family being Roman Catholic is the self-crucifixion programming of bearing your cross as your identity, bearing your pain as your badge of honor. And I have some, try not to just sort of like throw out some rude comments, because that is just something that is just never, I'm like, yep, okay, bye, enjoy that, thanks. It's never been a thing for me. It's never, ever been a thing. However, becoming aware of these family weights, this emotional content, has been a learning process, because until you're actually aware of them, they're still present in your emotional thought forms and your own patterns. One of the biggest things that clued me into my family patterns is the fear and the judgment and the anger. What my parents would get angry and judgmental about, and what they get scared about. Those three things showed me what my family patterns were. And also, having spent, I grew up around my grandparents. I spent so much time around my grandparents that when I began to become aware of the mechanics of these patterns coming to the surface in thought forms and being verbally expressed around me, watching my grandparents and then watching my parents, and realizing how my parents were carbon copies of the same patterns, and my mind just going and just like, holy, buckets of, yeah, it was just like, wow.
Yes.
Wow. So those three things are really, really important. Anytime there's judgment, fear, or anger that comes up, I guarantee you it's part of a pattern. I guarantee you that it's a trigger from something that you've learned, if not from your parents, then somebody very close to you. And sometimes we adopt patterns of the people that we socialize with so that we are accepted and loved by our social circle. So that's something else to look at. But it's always judgment, fear, and anger. Those three emotions hide the information of the pattern inside of us. Yeah, bearing one's cross, bearing one's pain as identity. Yeah, never been my thing. I'm not a pacifist at all. And especially like with being the black sheep in the family, my family's pretty, up until, I went out in my 20s, I partied and I drank and I danced, which is something, Mennonites generally, especially some of the stricter sects, really, not a thing. It's just like, verbatim, you got to keep, pure thoughts and everything like that. It's like, yeah, but if you don't experience chaos, you don't understand the contrast of peace. That's one of the big things that I learned in looking at the judgment, the fear, and the anger of the patterns of my family.
Awesome.
My 2 cents.
Thank you so much. Kelly. One other pattern that I'll talk about myself is because I was born in a Hindu family. In India, the generational pattern that is handed down into Hindu families is a hatred of Muslims and Christians, right? Everybody knows that the country is divided. There's the Hindu sect and Muslim and Christian. So unfortunately for my mother, she put me, when I was in 4th grade, she put me in a school that was predominantly, all my friends were Muslim, and then my neighbors were Muslim. And then the school was a Protestant school, so we had church. So every Wednesday, hiding from her, I would leave early, go attend Mass at my school, because it was a Christian-run school. So we said the prayer, Our Father, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, every day for assembly, right? Instead of the national anthem, we actually said the prayer every day. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. Beautiful. I think Aline is about to fall off, so we will end at this. This was a wonderful, wonderful session. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, Louise, April, Eileen, everybody that's present here, and everybody online. Happy Mother's Day. This has been a wonderful discussion. We'll meet again next week, and let's see what topics come up. And I think Blanca said something very interesting. I'll read that before we go. Blanca said, I wonder about that abandonment pattern you mentioned. It also happens when the parents are physically there yet abandon the kid by dedicating self to other activities that ignore the child or is not present, being a workaholic or alcoholic, right? Which Eckhart says the beingness of the parent is not flowing into the child. And that's why teenagers kind of become miscreants or don't act properly, is because the parent did not acknowledge the child. So beautiful. Y'all are incredible. Thank you so much. It's an honor and a privilege week after week. So beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic week and many blessings. Much love. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.